Welcome everyone to our seventh episode, to our seventh episode of the Godcast on Buddhism. We are joined here by Reverend Koyama, who is a local Buddhist leader in our town. And we will now. We're super grateful that he's here, so we will now be, since he's obviously an expert of Buddhism and on Eastern religion, so-called Eastern religion, that's one of the questions we'll delve into, is definitely not one of our specialties. We wanted to reach out and give his takes on Eastern religion, the Dharmic religions, and Buddhism. So that being said, Mr. Reverend Koyama, we noticed through the study of religion that the origin story is really generally the story of the founder of a religion. For example, in Christianity, the Nativity in the Gospels sets off the whole thing. In Islam, it's the first revelations of Muhammad that sets off the whole course of Islam. So we were wondering, what would be a good summary of the life of Siddhartha Gautama? What would that entail?
Sure. So, first I'd like to thank you both for including me in today's podcast. I'm actually very happy that a lot of you are interested in this and are actually reaching out and you've reached out to me. So, without further ado, let's get started on this. So I would say that one of the biggest stories about this, or I would say that how this all started would probably be with the birth of Siddhartha Gautama, and that would be the birth in Lumbini's garden in what is today Nepal. And, a lot of people think, Buddha was born in India, but it really was, I think it was like, they didn't have the same type of borders at the time. So where Nepal is today, that's where Siddhartha Gautama was born. The story goes that I'm going to give you a very brief summary of the Buddha's life, and basically what ended up happening was that Queen Maya and King Suddhodana, who were the kings and queen at the time, really wanted to have a child. And then in a dream, Queen Maya saw or envisioned a white elephant entering into her womb. And then it wasn't long after that on a pilgrimage back to her home in Lumbini Garden, she gave birth to Prince Siddhartha from her right, and the legend says he was born from her right side. And after that, he took 7 steps and pointed to the heaven and the earth and said, "I alone am the exalted one." And from that point on, it was, the Prince Siddhartha was born. And then it was very interesting because he lost his mother. It wasn't soon after his birth that Queen Maya passed away. So anyways, Prince Siddhartha is going to grow up, right? And I skipped an important part. Before he was, when he was still an infant and before his mother passed away, they actually were visited by a great seer named Asita. And Asita looked at the Buddha or looked at Prince Siddhartha and then addressed the parents and said, "Your son is either going to be the greatest conqueror of the world and conquer the whole world and basically become its king, or he's going to be a religiously awakened one and save the world." So naturally, King Suddhodana didn't want his son to go the religious route. He wanted his son to be like him, a king and the conqueror of the world. And so because of that, he sheltered his son in the walls of the palace, and he grew up with nothing but luxury. And jump ahead to when he's in his 20s. Prince Siddhartha finally leaves the palace gates. And he goes out 4 times, and each time he sees something, he sees four. You could almost call these like, I guess, if we're going to use Christian words, like four revelations, or there were four sights that caused him to, figure something out. And the first one that he saw was an old man, and he asked his attendant, what's wrong with him? And he says, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just old. And the Prince Siddhartha becomes scared, and he goes, oh my gosh, am I going to get old too? And his attendant says, unfortunately, yes. He goes, everybody gets old. And then the second time he goes out, he sees this other person who's sick. They're probably throwing up, and there's probably boils on their face, and it's not very pleasant to look at. And Prince Siddhartha asks his attendant, and he goes, what's wrong with him? And then he says, no, well, nothing's wrong. He's just sick. And then Prince Siddhartha goes, oh my gosh, am I going to get sick? Am I going to come down with sickness? And the attendant says, yes, even you will come down with sickness. And then the third time he sees a funeral happening. And he goes, what's going on here? And he says this, and then his attendant says, this is death. And finally, in Prince Siddhartha, this is what shocks Prince Siddhartha the most, and says, am I going to die someday? And the attendant says, yes, unfortunately, even you, great prince, are not exempt from death. So, and then the fourth time he goes out, he sees a mendicant or a renunciant, you could say. These are like what look like holy people who are sitting in meditation. And he says, what's going on with this person? And then the attendant says, this person is a renunciant, and they are out to find they're a seeker of truth. They're out to try and find the meaning of life, right? And so Siddhartha ponders this, and finally decides to abandon his palace, abandon his riches, abandon, in a sense, like also leave his wife and child as well. And says, I'm going to become one of these seekers of truth. So Prince Siddhartha leaves the palace at nighttime without even saying goodbye to his relatives. And the reason why he does this is because he knows that if he wakes them up, or if he says goodbye to them, he's not going to be able to leave. So he has to just, cut the cord right there and just leave. So he goes into the forest, and he joins these five other mendicants. And this particular practice calls for great renouncing. So they're, they basically don't indulge in anything. They don't eat regular food. If they need water, they have the dewdrops to drink from, or if a bug dies in front of them, then they could eat that perhaps. There is a legend that Prince Siddhartha, at the time of his great renunciation, was only eating like 1 grain of rice per day. So finally, it gets to the point where Siddhartha's starting to realize this extreme renunciation is not working, because if I continue this, I'm going to die without becoming awakened. Then finally, this woman walks by, and she has this bowl of rice milk, and she actually offers some to Siddhartha, and he willfully takes it, and the other 5 renunciants kind of cast him off and just say, "Oh, you messed up. You took food. You don't have any self-discipline. We renounce you." And so they left him. But then Siddhartha realizes that, you know what? This is actually what we call the middle way. I went from extreme pleasure, right? Like being raised in this castle, being raised in this castle. And then I went to extreme renunciation, and that didn't work either. I have to find somewhere in the middle. And so he says, well, I'm going to sit under this spot, which happens to be a Bodhi tree. I'm going to sit under this Bodhi tree, and I'm going to sit here until I renounce, or until I free myself of my inner desires and my inner evil, you could say. And then the word for that is Mara, M-A-R-A. The Mara, the devil king, you could kind of personify. But in reality, what that is that, it's his humanistic desires and ego. So finally, he sits under the tree, and then dedicates his meditation practice to such that Mara tries again to get him to move from that spot. He sends these beautiful dancing girls. He tries to send armies of evil demons to try and scare him away, and none of it's working. And then finally, it's debatable the amount of time he sat under the tree. Some say 49 days, some say 7 days, a week. So after a certain amount of time, finally Siddhartha is awakened to the morning star, and to the early morning star, and then declares that he is now enlightened, and he touches the earth and says, "The earth is my witness." And then from that point, he raises from his seat and then joins the 5 ascetics that renounced him before, and they noticed something was different about him. And then they realized, okay, he actually has been awakened to a great spiritual awakening, and we're going to listen to him now. And that is considered to be the first turning of the Dharma wheel. And there he teaches the way of enlightenment, and then he teaches for about 45 years, and then finally he passes into what we call parinirvana, or the ultimate nirvana, when he dies. And he says, I may be gone, I may not physically be here, but the teachings are still here, and those are the things that you need to hold on to. Those are the things that you need to use to seek the path of enlightenment. So, and that is, in a nutshell, sort of the origin story of Buddhism right there.
Wow, that was so incredibly fascinating, because we for school we read a book by Hermann Hesse. It was a 20th century novel. It's called Siddhartha, and it's just like what you said was like was a much more detailed version of that. You had like the part with Nepal, to me, is really fascinating. I guess. Because you don't normally think it's India. He comes from India. Maybe even he's born in China, because it was obviously popular there and still is to this day. But like, I didn't know he was born in Nepal. And there was another cool thing too, which is you mentioned like Nirvana and you said Mara too. And our next question for you was going to be what are some of these Buddhist and Dharmic terminology? Like, what does Dharma mean? What does karma mean? Samsara, nirvana, and moksha? Like, we can just take 2 at a time if that works with you.
Wow. Okay. Well, how much time do you guys have?
You got time.
We have like till the end of the day, so it's pretty much.
That's the thing. These words are thrown around a lot now, and they're thrown around, and they're thrown around, and they're used in everyday conversation now, which is very interesting. Karma, I've heard karma being used a lot. Now, it's interesting because now, let's start with Dharma. Okay, like Dharma can mean many things. Now, literally speaking, or literally translating, right? It just means the teaching or the truth, right? Teaching or truth. And then even in, I think like in Hindi, or it's law, right? Law, the law. And of course, when we think of law, right, we're thinking, well, okay, Congress, and when you write things into law, and then when you sign things into law, it becomes, a law, and you have to obey it, right? But we're talking about, universal law, right? And so, so Dharma actually has a very, very, not a very simple translation, but a deep meaning. And in fact, actually, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right? Keep those 3 things in mind. These are what we call the 3 jewels, or the 3 treasures, right? And when one becomes formally a Buddhist, they actually say, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the great teacher who taught the way of enlightenment. I take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings that the teacher gave, right? And then I take refuge in the Sangha. And the Sangha is all of us taking refuge in the Buddha, learning the Dharma, trying to live the best that we can by the Dharma. So some of these words, right, like Dharma, Buddha, for instance, for example, has a very simple translation. Buddha doesn't mean God, or it doesn't mean divine being. Buddha means simply one who is awakened to the truth, one who is awakened to who is awakened and sees everything for what it really is. And so, these words actually have very simple translations, but very deep meanings. So let's move on to karma, right? Karma is used so much in the United States now, I often, and I'm going to say this, it's often used incorrectly.
People use karma as sort of like a divine justice sort of thing, like, ooh, you did that bad thing, karma's going to come and attack you, or karma's the B word, right? Like people...
Yeah.
Yeah, you've heard that before, right? And it's incorrect, and that's because karma is not, and again, another simple translation, right? Simple translation of karma is cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. But the meaning is so deep. I'm sorry, were you going to ask me something about that, or?
Oh no, I wasn't. I was just hanging up by the microphone. Just keep going. This is super fascinating.
Yeah, no problem. So karma, right, just means cause. I mean, simply can mean cause and effect. So the translation is easy, but the understanding is very difficult. So, first thing, in traditional old Buddhism, this still goes with the logic of like the idea of rebirth or reincarnation, right? And the actions that you do in this life will also affect the actions that occur in your next life, and the previous actions in your life also. The previous actions you did in previous lives also affect the outcome of what's happening here. But it shouldn't be looked at necessarily as like this divine justice thing, like we're all being judged. It simply means cause and effect, right? There's, in a sense, sort of like you could say, an order to the system. Now, let's look. For example, this is just a receipt. Okay, I just tore it in two, right? Now, when I did that, there's a couple things that could have happened, right? Number one, negatively speaking, it could mean that I was angry and I was so upset and I tore this thing in two to vent my frustration. So this thing acted as sort of a thing for my frustration. However, in another sense, I tore this thing in two. I now have two pieces of paper instead of one. So, again, karma just means cause and effect, right? And if someone is harmed, right, or if I harm someone, there is a cause and effect to that, right? When if I am distracted and I drop a glass, right, the glass broke, right? I was distracted and the glass broke. It can be very simple, but actually now where it gets complicated is like this spider web of choices, actions, consequences that occur because of the choices that we make, right? So, for example, you chose to do this podcast today, and that means that the time that we're doing this podcast, you had to sacrifice something else, right? You didn't get to play video games for this. You didn't get to do this other homework assignment. You're on here talking to me, right? So cause and effect. It's like, okay, sure, you are able to talk to me, and whether you think that's a positive or a negative, that's up to you. But then it's like, yeah, but then you have less time to play your video games, right? So there's the cause and effect there. So that's actually sort of on a here and now, and on a like, this is what's happened in this life kind of example. It gets really more complicated when we go into the cosmic and sort of like cosmology of Buddhism. Karma gets really, really complicated when we get into that. Samsara. Samsara is the wheel of existence. So you all know that rebirth or reincarnation is also sort of a popular terminology that's thrown around in Buddhism. And so, simply speaking, there are 6 realms of existences in Buddhism. The first is the realm that you want to be in Buddhism is the human realm, because the human realm is pretty much the only realm where you can really become a Buddha, where you can really appreciate the teachings of Buddhism. Then the upper realms are, so the human realm is one. Then there's the heavenly realm where you are a celestial being, and that really also symbolizes pleasure, because you're always on high. There's nothing but good times, and there's nothing but wonderful music in the air, and there's wonderful food to eat all the time, wonderful drink. You're in this heavenly place. Then the third realm is the fighting deity realm, the Titan realm, and that is you're kind of like this demigod thing, and you can but you're always competing with the heavenly realms. Then the lower realms. Then the animal realm is the realm that pretty much only acting on instinct, right? Animals, don't have. It's arguable, of course. We could say animals could have complex thought, but largely, right? Animals, in a sense, kind of go on their instinct and on their base functions, right? To eat, to find shelter, to survive, which is what we do as well. But we're a little more complicated as humans. Then the fifth realm is the realm of the hungry ghosts. This one represents sort of ultimate desire, where you never get what you want, because in this realm it's depicted as you are this fat ghost with this big belly but these tiny little mouth, and there's nothing but a beautiful spread of food around you, and each time you bring the food to your mouth, it bursts into flame and becomes ash. So there's that. And then finally there's the hell realms, where there's a lot of torturing and a lot, you're split up and all that stuff, all the matching. It sounds almost like the Christian hell, frankly. The only difference is that you don't stay in these realms forever, right? Whereas like in Abrahamic religions, where when you go to heaven or hell, that's kind of for all eternity. In the realm of Buddhism, the eternity part is sort of the realm of the 6 existences. So it's like you're going to keep going on that realm of existence and keep spiraling through all of that, and until, right, you reach, and now we come to the next term, nirvana, right? Nirvana, literally translated, is like to snuff out, and it's almost like they equate that with the blowing out of a candle, right? And that's when you extinguish your self-centered ego, your self-centered desires and passions. And then once that happens, when you become a Buddha, when you become nirvana, when you reach that enlightenment, you go off of the karmic wheel. So you're no longer in that cycle of birth and death. And so that's what nirvana really means. Nirvana's not really a heaven; it's a state of being that actually ensures that we no longer cycle through the 6 realms of existence. So there's my long-winded explanation of a lot of those terminologies. I see the time left, that we only have 7 minutes left and everything like that. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping well on time here. So.
Oh yeah, I think the meeting is supposed to end. Okay, wait, but the meeting will end, but we can just if we just jump back on the thing, it continues. So yeah.
Okay, sure. All right.
Maybe Rylan could ask a question now, and then afterwards Noah could do that.
I want to start it over.
Awesome. So Rylan, you want to ask this question?
Yeah. All right. So could you tell us a little bit about the Eightfold Path? Because I've heard it's kind of like a path of enlightenment, but could you kind of explain how it works and everything?
Well, I definitely will. And I didn't know there was 3 of you there. Hi, Rylan. Nice to meet you.
Hello, sorry.
No worries. So before I talk about the Eightfold Path, I actually have to talk about the Four Noble Truths. You probably have heard of those. So the Four Noble Truths are the sort of what's considered to be the first teaching of the Buddha. So, or when the Buddha first talks about, or first encounters his followers again and he gives his first lesson, he talks about the Four Noble Truths. And the Eightfold Path is actually the fourth truth. So before we get to that, we have to talk about the first three. So the first truth, right, is that existence is hard. It's often translated as to life is suffering. I don't like this translation all that much because especially in today's society, and when we hear that, or if we hear that, we're going to be like, why would I want to join this religion, right? The first truth is that life is suffering, but you know what? There is a truth to that. So let's talk about that, right? The first noble truth, life is suffering, or I like, life is hard, or life, there is suffering in life, right? We all want things. You three want things. I want things. Everybody else wants things. The people outside want things. We all want things. The three of you want things too, and you probably want different things. Simple. Maybe I've never heard of a high school person who doesn't like pizza. I'm certain they exist, but you probably all like pizza, right? But then you probably get into an argument about what toppings you want on it. So then what ends up happening, right, is this is where this comes to the second truth, right? So the first truth is that there is suffering in life, right? And the second truth is that there is a cause for the suffering, and that is your own self-centered egos and desires and me first attitude. And everybody has this. Everybody, you all have this, and because of this, right, it's hard for a lot of us to live in harmony. So, like I said, like bring up the pizza argument, right? Now, maybe we can agree that we all like pizza, but then maybe Xavier wants pepperoni on it, but Noah says, no, I hate pepperoni, I want sausage, right? Or maybe it's like, and then maybe Rylan says, no, but I'm a vegetarian, I can't eat meat, right? And I don't know, I mean, maybe.
He actually is vegan. That's crazy.
Okay, all right, there you go. So, right?
That's crazy. Oh my gosh.
So then what ends up happening, right, is that there's this argument that breaks out. We can't come to an agreement. And so, and this is what causes the suffering, right? This is what causes the suffering. And then the third truth is that, don't worry, there is a cessation of the suffering. There is a way to end the suffering. And then the fourth truth is how to do that. So let's talk about how to do that. I have the chat here. So this is a if you look in the chat, this is sort of an acronym. We call it VT-SCLEM. And this is when I teach the Sunday school kids, I try to teach them this acronym. And I know it doesn't say anything, but let's talk about the first Eightfold Path, right? And right view. Okay, there's right view, and then this is our viewpoint. This is sort of our general viewpoint on things. This is our view on thing. And then of course, this comes, depending on the Buddhist school that you belong to, this could be your view on life itself, or your view on humanity, and of course the view that, I don't want to harm. I want to cause as little harm as possible. And then right thought. We all have thoughts. We all have these inner thoughts, and usually our thoughts are, how can I win at this competition, or how can I beat the other guy, or how can I get this person to like me, right? But really what our right thoughts should be is, how can I help people? What can I do to benefit others, right? We should always have those thoughts in our head, instead of like, what can I do to win? What can I do to beat the other person? The next one is right speech. Okay, right speech. So when we, obviously in this current political climate and current time of pandemic, we're seeing a lot of not nice speech happening, and a lot of people saying not very nice things about each other. When we talk, right, it's important we say words of kindness. It's important that we say words that aren't going to destroy a person, but help a person. And then of course, everyone knows that famous quote by the Dalai Lama, right? That, like when you're talking, you're saying something you already know. When you listen, you may learn something new. So, but right speech, right? Do our words have kindness? Do our words have do our words help people, right? Right? Oh, sorry. Right conduct, right? Right conduct means right action, or like doing, basically right things that we do. So, driving your car really fast and trying to hit a mailbox off of its hinge, probably not such a nice thing to do. Or pretty much anything Bart Simpson does, it's probably not the right conduct and everything. But again, when we're younger, we're more impulsive. And then this brings us into livelihood, right? How we live our lives, right? And so I guess I sort of have I don't know, I don't want to say unique view on this, but frankly, I say more like trying our best not to be hypocrites. When we criticize others and we point out the demons in others, and then we kind of go and do the same thing, right? We're not really living our lives the way that we hold up to other people's standards as well. So, and then the next one is right effort. Okay. So this one's, I think, is really important, right effort or energy. So obviously we've all done this before. We've excuse me for saying, but we've BS'd on essays. We have, we've done the thing where we've written essays and we've, made the margins as, little as possible so we can make more pages, or make the text just a little 0.5 a little bit bigger so it fills more pages. It looks like it's, and teachers see this all the time, by the way. Don't think you're going to fool your teachers. The teachers always know. So the effort, right? The effort we put into the study, like when we write a paper and we've done no research, right? It's going to be a really crappy paper. Excuse my French, but it's going to be a really bad paper.
No, that's good. That's fine.
And that's the thing. See, I lost the point there for right speech. I shouldn't swear. Yeah, I shouldn't swear either. But that's the point. But that's my thing, right? Is that right effort, right? It's not important just to resolve to do these things. You actually have to put the effort and the energy into it, right? And then here's one that you all probably right, mindfulness. You've probably heard this term. There's another term, right? Mindfulness, right? That you've probably heard this term being tossed around when people talk about Buddhism and everything like that, right? Mindfulness, but that's the thing, right? Being mindful of all of the actions and the consequences that your actions will have, right? All the consequences and the causes and effects that your actions will have, right? I would almost say that mindfulness sort of stops us from always being so impulsive all the time. Stops us from having just a gut reaction. Something happens to you. Sorry for an extreme example, but you get punched in the face, right? Your natural reaction is, I'm going to punch you back, right? Again, like mindfulness stops us from doing that. And then mindfulness also is there for us when we are trying to figure out the next stages of our life as well. And so that's the next part. And then finally, right, the last one is right meditation. And right meditation, again, the problem is meditation is a very, very loose word in the United States right now. It can mean many things to many different people. Often when you think of meditation, you think of those pictures you see of those Buddhist monks in the mountains sitting on a rock and, in this perfect samadhi meditation kind of setup. That's not just what meditation is. Meditation can also mean concentration. Right. So the concentration that you put into the task that you do, and the concentration in the mental energy that you spend, actually in a sense, like when a baseball player actually, does whatever ritual that they need to do in order to, get themselves in the best mindset to, hit a home run or to pitch like a perfect game, whatever. That's what meditation can be too. So that's the Eightfold Path right there.
Wow, and like there was some terminology that reminded me of the threefold path of Asha and Zoroastrianism, because there's like right thought, right speech, and right action. So like yeah, but like this one was like obviously more complex, and then like when you said and like similarly to the Buddhist and Dharmic terms, like when you have a word, there's a lot more that meets it than just saying mindfulness, and how you talk about meditation being concentration. So I thought that was something that was really fascinating. Maybe Noah could ask a question now, and then we could go over to Balin if that's good.
Sure, I'd love to. So I have the list. Which one do you want me to read off?
Perhaps you could ask about the scriptures, if there's any scriptures that are used. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me find that one real quick.
I'm just kind of skipping the one that we talked about, the steps to reach your nirvana, because that was already described in the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. So, yeah.
Which number is that?
It's like on the first one. It's like number. It's like after number 4. I'm sorry. It's after number. Actually, it's 2 ones after number 4.
Yeah, I see it. So, if any, what scriptures are used within Buddhism?
Scriptures. Wow. Okay. I like this. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, and I'm certain you've heard this word before. Now, and there's 2 languages now where there's Chinese as well, but when we chant, so the first, so the first language we're talking about here is Pali, right? You've heard Pali. There's and Pali is a language that was used to write what we call the Buddha, or the Pali Canon, and that is the Pali Canon is a canonical text of suttas. Now in Pali, they're referred to as suttas. In Sanskrit, they're referred to as sutras. Okay. And these are written down just sermons of the Buddha. Okay, now I can say now that the Mahayana. Now there's of course 2 schools, or there's 2 main schools of thought. I don't like dichotomizing, but there's Theravada and then Mahayana. I don't like to put those 2 necessarily as 2 different things, but the Theravada monks from you get Theravada monks from Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma or Myanmar, and Cambodia, and Laos, and then for places like China and Korea, Japan, they're more Mahayana Buddhists, you could say. Anyways, so all of these schools use different scriptures or different sutras, you could say, that base their teachings off of, or that basically they base their teachings off of. And these sutras are sermons given by the Buddha. So most sutras start with a phrase that says, "Thus have I heard," or "I have heard," or "Thus I have heard," and then the legend goes that Ananda, this was the Buddha's nephew. This was the Buddha's nephew, and it was said that he was one of the last disciples of the Buddha to reach enlightenment, and it was said that he lived to the first council of the first council where they actually canonicalized the Buddhist texts, and it was said that Ananda memorized them all and was able to recite every single sermon given by the Buddha by memory. So that's a sort of short summary of what the sutras or the scriptures are in Buddhism. So it's important to notice, I think same thing as Jesus and Muhammad, they themselves, or all the prophets for that matter, they themselves didn't really write anything down as far as I know. Like, it was people who came after them who said, they said this, or they said this, right? Even Moses, right? When Moses went up to the mountaintop, it wasn't he who wrote down on the stone tablets, it was God. Right, and so the same thing. All these prophets, right? They didn't write down any of their teachings. It was either given to them by divinity or it was written after their passing. So.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because you talked about how they were compiling the canon. That brought to mind, that actually brought to mind two things from other religions, from like two Abrahamic religions. In Christianity, there was, I was going to actually say it was the First Council of Nicaea, but I think that's way too late. That was when they talked about this thing called the Arian controversy. But the way that in Christianity it was compiled was like partially through popular appeal. Like people liked the three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then John was popular enough to make it within the canon. So it does kind of remind me of that. And also like in Islam, I believe it was like the third caliph, but I could be wrong. He like burned all the other copies of the Quran and said, "Here you go. This is the one we're gonna use for now." Although that's probably an oversimplification. That just kind of brought to mind that. And then also, I was wondering perhaps Balin could ask a question right now, if that's good. You could ask this question right here. It's a reincarnation question.
Okay. This one?
What is the Buddhist view on reincarnation?
Yeah. Okay, so what is the Buddhist view on reincarnation, and how can you tell if you have lived multiple lives beforehand?
Okay. Thank you very much for asking that question. I have to preface with this. Number one, I should have prefaced this actually at the very, very beginning of this, is that, remember, I come from a school of Buddhism called Jodo Shinshu, and we can get into that way later. But I come from a school of I come from a particular school of Buddhism, or I come from the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism. So and then you also have to remember, like as the decades, or as the hundreds and centuries and even eon of time, the idea and understanding of reincarnation or rebirth is a little bit different. I will say this. So you have to take what I say as not like speaking for all of Buddhism. So that's the first thing. I am only speaking from my school of Buddhism and the way that I was taught. So first off, the idea of rebirth and reincarnation. Some people still take it very, very literally. Some people say, I'm still like, it's this, it's this thing where I have to keep on living several lifetimes before I am finally awakened and can get off the samsaric wheel. One of my good friends is a Sri Lankan monk, and he is very convinced that I was some type of a holy person in a previous life, because with the way that I've spoken with him before, and I actually, when you see a Sri Lankan monk, it's really important to do this. This shows a sign of respect. This is a holy person, right? You're showing a sign. So I did that when I first met him, and he said, "Wow," he goes, "You knew to do that." And he says, that means that you were this in the previous life, right? So, and I didn't challenge him on that belief. In Mahayana Buddhism, the idea of reincarnation is a little more complicated, because we also preach that in Mahayana Buddhism, we also preach the concept of no self, Anatman. So Anatman, right? So in Hinduism, there's the Atman, right? And that's your soul, essentially, that goes through the several lives of reincarnation and everything like that, and goes through all the stuff, But in Mahayana Buddhism, we brought up this idea of Anatman, and it's the idea of the non-self, no self. So what do I mean by this? In the easiest way I can put this is that I have this concept of who I am right now, right? I am Reverend Tadao Koyama of the Tacoma Buddhist Temple. And the problem is this idea that we have of the self right now. We think that this is who we're going to have some of that when we are born into the next life. And there's the same thing, this idea of, I can't remember which movie star said it, but she said something like, in a previous life, I was Cleopatra, right? And I'm kind of like, it's like, are you sure about that? Right. And that's the, right. That's the, I mean, this is sort of the misunderstanding of I think of reincarnation people have, is that like, ooh, in a previous life, I might've been this famous person. We have this diluted notion of the self and our own self-importance. Again, when we talk about reincarnation or rebirth and everything, that also, it can be taken very, very literally, or it can be taken very, very figuratively. In my personal view of this, I'm a little bit in the middle here, because I do believe that there is a sense of transmigration that happens in the constant realm of cycle of birth and death. That being said, I don't think like it's this like, hey, like the movie Soul in Disney, the Pixar movie. I'm not this unique thing that gets to go on a stairway to heaven and then everything like that. So there's that. But so I'm a little bit in the middle here. But to answer your second part of your question, in many of the religious texts or the other commentaries or treatises that a lot of these Buddhist scholars have written, many of them have also talked about like dreams that they've had of previous lives or other things. And frankly, the Buddha in some of these sutras would actually talk about a person's previous life. They would say, in a previous life, this is what happened. So one of the famous stories of rebirth is the King Ashoka, who was one of the huge Buddhist patriarchs in India.
Yeah.
You've heard that name. So in King Ashoka, he basically in a previous life, he was this little kid, and he gave the Buddha a mud pie. Like he was making, he was a kid playing, making mud pies in the mud, and he gives the Buddha a mud pie. And I think Ananda was actually with the Buddha at the time, and Ananda said, well, gee, he goes, that's kind of bad. You don't give the Buddha mud. And the Buddha said, yeah, but the intention behind it was pure. The intention behind it, like he was trying to be friendly. Yes, you don't give mud to the Buddha, but at the same time, the intention behind it was actually good. So his rebirth is going to be a little complicated. So what ended up happening was that Ashoka was born as this ugly, evil guy who actually was a tyrant, and actually had a torture prison chamber in his castle, and it was actually called Ashoka's Hell. But then later on, because of his intention, he encountered a Buddhist monk who he tried to kill, and couldn't do it. Like he tried setting him on fire, that didn't work. He was unharmed. He tried to drown him. He just rose up out of the water. Nothing happened. And then Ashoka realized the profundity of Buddhism and became one of the great Buddhist patriarchs who did a total 180. So so there's that story of like rebirth and reincarnation there.
I like that story that you said about the kid giving the mud pie to the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it kind of almost reminds me of this sort of thing they have in Islam where, so you know how they're not allowed to eat pork, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it kind of has to do with the intentions thing. It's stated in the Quran, for example, that if you do eat pork like unintentionally, that it's like not a sin because it was not your intention to eat pork. So I feel like it's very similar to that.
Yeah. Again, like reincarnation, karma, the merit that it's brought up, it's all of these things are can get very complicated in the story of Buddhism. But the concept of reincarnation itself, again, can get very complicated once you get into Mahayana Buddhism, because the one of the core doctrines is the concept of no self, right? And then and so yeah, I don't want to go too much into that, but let's break away now and see if anyone has any other questions for.
Maybe Balin can ask question 5 down there, and then since Rylan is a guy Rylan's very into Taoism, so maybe he could ask the next 2. So Balin, you could jump in with that, number 5.
Does pantheism, the belief that God is the universe, play a role in Buddhism, or is the universe an illusion?
Oh, wow. Okay. So generally speaking, very generally speaking, most Buddhist schools that I know of do not subscribe to the idea that there is a creator deity. That being said, we also don't deny the existence of a creator deity either. I'm not saying, and this doesn't say that, oh yeah, all Buddhists are secretly Christians or secretly Muslim. When the Buddha was asked a question like that, he would actually sort of not answer it. And he would actually say, why are you so concerned about what's going on in the celestial heavens? You should be concerned about what you're doing right now. And so yes and no. So like no, but it's a no with a but, because it's sort of like, to say that like, oh, Buddhists are atheists, right? Is I think too simplistic. It's too. I mean, the idea that it's like, yes, we don't believe in a creator deity, but we are still very much a religion. We are still very much a religion that it goes on a large basis of faith. So that should also be understood. We do necessarily, I think we also agree that the Dharma, or the world of Buddhist cosmology, or that the wheel of the Dharma, right, will turn. And we use this as analogies and metaphors, but also, in a sense, it's like universal law, right? There's like that as well. I don't know if I would equate that to a god necessarily, but yeah. And sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Oh yeah, so we were thinking, so because we'd heard in the past, and I guess this is possible. This is misinformation that some Buddhists were pantheists, so there's like the universe is quote unquote God, but there's also in Hinduism, my understanding of the religion is that the universe is actually an illusion, and I've heard that Buddhism initially started out as a particular sect, so to speak, of Hinduism, and then became its own religion. So I was wondering if there's still that Hindu concept of the universe being an illusion.
And this is going to be my Buddhist bias, but actually Buddhism came first.
Really? That's awesome.
Buddhism came first, and if actually Hinduism was a religion that was developed later. And the sort of religion that was around before Buddhism was like the Brahmin, like the religions of the Brahmin, and like the spiritual holy men, and the not even Jainism. Jainism didn't come there yet, but they're like, or Vedic, I guess you could say, like,
yeah, the Vedic age.
And but Hinduism actually came a little bit later, and they actually had to incorporate themselves within the Buddhist sphere by saying that Buddha is a reincarnation of one of the Hindu gods. I can't remember which one, but so there's that. But is the universe is an illusion? I actually, that's a very interesting question. I don't know. Responding to Hinduism, I don't know enough about Hinduism to respond to that. I will say this: we ourselves have as imperfect, non-enlightened beings, have an illusion or a delusion of what the universe is or the world around us. We are not enlightened or awakened beings. So yes, the universe is an illusion, but only because it's being seen through our own eyes. So.
Awesome. And like when the meeting ends in like 10 minutes, you can just like rejoin if that works for you, unless there's like a time crunch or anything. But like, I think like Rylan, do you want to ask questions 1 and 2? Then Noah could ask number 3, and then Balin could ask 6 if that's good. Awesome. Yeah.
Right. So what's your opinion on Taoism? And do you think that, in your opinion, do you think Taoism and Buddhism can be practiced both at the same time without any major contradictions?
Taoism, I think, is a really cool teaching, and of course, it also has. There's also a large sense of karma in Taoism as well, or the way things work. I will say that in the mysticism in Taoism and Buddhism kind of don't mesh too much because, in some forms of Taoism, the goal is to be an eternal. The goal is to live forever. The goal is to be like an eternal and immortal being on this world. There's that cool story in China about that one guy who claimed that he was like 200 something years old or something like that. So I don't know if that's true. But he did practice, I think, was a strict Taoist and practiced and ate some of those Taoist diets and everything, those roots that are in China. China's a very interesting place. Even in, they have like a lot of it's really neat because they have a lot of these old apothecaries that they had and that are still some of the formulas that are still used today. But can Taoism and Buddhism be practiced at the same time? I don't know. It's very common in the United States these days to kind of double dip or to or to sort of like say, oh, I'm this and this and this and this. I'm a Christian Buddhist, and I'm kind of like, sometimes I go like, gee, how does that work? Because I think that what is happening, or the question that you're asking, is that I feel that what's happening is that there is this new spiritual movement in the United States where people like to go in and for lack of a better term, cherry pick some of the things that they like about certain religions and try to kind of mesh it together and make up their own. So, or to sort of create their own. So that is definitely something that I think that is going on. But strictly speaking, like if you kind of become if your intention is to become a Buddhist, you in a sense take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So in a strict sense, no, but I think that there is this spiritual movement that's happening in the United States that incorporates various and many different Eastern philosophies. So
awesome. And then Rylan, did you want to ask the second Taoist question? Yeah.
Well, before that, I'd like to ask in your opinion, do you think Taoism and Buddhism have any synergy? Because I know meditation is common in both philosophies or religions.
Yeah, I mean, and there's forms of meditation in Christianity and Islam and and Judaism as well. I mean, there's synergy in all religion, right? I mean, religion was made is sort of to keep people in a sense, or not. Religion I think came around in a sense because lots of folks needed in a sense a type of order to follow that wasn't really based on a here in this world thing. It wasn't until Nietzsche came around and you could say killed God and and sort of came up with this nihilism sort of thing. But yes, absolutely, there is definitely similar teachings and similar practices. That doesn't necessarily make them the same, but that doesn't also mean that that they can't get along or that that there's conflict. So.
But what I want to say about Nietzsche, which actually kind of interesting about it, is he was influenced a lot by a guy named Arthur Schopenhauer, and he was the first Western philosopher to seriously study Buddhism, and he actually made allusions to himself, kind of following what the Buddha did a little bit. He kind of drew parallels between himself and that because he really liked Buddhism, and then Nietzsche kind of took Schopenhauer's ideas. So it's kind of cool how it's somewhat rooted in something that far back and something we're talking about. Yeah.
So the next question is, do you think the concept of the yin and yang, do they exist in Buddhism, or is that only a Taoism thing, or is there an equivalent in Buddhism?
I think one of the equivalents in Buddhism is the wheel of the Dharma. So the wheel, there's a wheel with 8 spouts, and that is considered to be sort of the symbology in the Buddhism. At least here, when you go to Japan, it's the swastika. The swastika is used until, and of course that's controversial because Hitler perverted it and used it for something that it wasn't originally intended for. So for a long time, actually, the Buddhist symbol was the swastika. But now, to catch up to the modern times, it's the wheel of the Dharma. I don't see too many. There might be some Chinese sects of Buddhism that may incorporate the yin and yang, but I haven't. But in most of my travels, I haven't seen, and especially in Japan, I haven't seen the yin and yang used as sort of the Buddhist symbology. So.
Awesome. And then Noah, do you want to ask question 3, and then Balin could jump in with question 6?
Okay, yeah. So this is actually one of the questions I wrote down, but what makes Buddhism uniquely Eastern? Well, I guess that's not the term, but what makes it uniquely not Western?
Oh, that's a hard question. I mean, this is. I would say that even that today now we should almost we shouldn't put the label of Eastern and Western on it anyway, because there's actually so many practicing Buddhists in the United States, right? I mean, has it become and now in Europe as well, it's has it become a Western religion just as much? But I mean, geography, of course, plays a big part into that. But the problem with Western and Eastern terminology is the fact that that term, I think, was used by Western scholars. So, and what I mean by that is, actually, to actually, and of course, air out our own dirty laundry here. So the term Mahayana, right? So you've heard of Theravada versus Mahayana Buddhism. So Mahayana actually means the greater vehicle. Greater vehicle, right? Which imply, and then when we refer to the Theravada schools or the Vinaya schools, we would actually call them Hinayana, which means the lesser vehicle. And so I would say that we should avoid using the terminology of Buddhism as Eastern, same with Taoism as Eastern, or Confucianism or Hinduism as Eastern, because it can kind of, in a sense, bring up prejudices as well. And what I mean by that is, or connotations with that word. When we think Western, we think logical, civilized, or logical or civilized, or scientific. When we think of Eastern, words like spiritual or superstitious or mystic, right, gets thrown in there. And so, if anything, I would actually push back on the question by saying we should actually try to stop using terms like Western versus Western thought versus Eastern thought. And in a geographical sense, when we talk about the philosophers from China, or the great, or the Confucius, or Confucianism, or or that kind of thing, right? We need to, I think, be careful about how we use that terminology, even and it's still a thing that's been happening to even a show. Have any of you watched the show? I personally love the show, but The Good Place, with Ted Danson, and it's on.
Balin's seen it.
Okay. Even at the very end, when they're about to end all things, and sorry, spoilers ahead, but she's like, "Don't you have?" One of the characters, she says, "Don't you have a philosopher who can make me feel better, or a spiritual thing, and Kant or John Locke, or a Socrates quote to make me feel better?" And then one of the other characters responds and goes, "Well, those guys were more focused on rules and law and civilization." He goes, "So when you want spiritualism, you actually have to turn to the East." And I'm kind of like, oh, It's like the Native Americans are very spiritual people. It's like,
That's true. Yeah.
it's like why does the East have a monopoly on that, or this mysticism or spiritual? Even, I mean, okay, here's an example. It's like the idea of Doctor Strange, right? When you go Doctor Strange, what was he doing in the West, right? He was trying to do all this like surgery and like all the scientific stuff, and then what ends up happening? He goes to the East and he gets trained by this white guru in the movie, right? But he gets trained by this guru and he learns like this mysticism and the things of the universe and everything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks.
Yeah. No problem. It's not that I don't think that Buddhism didn't come from the East or didn't come from India, or that geography is not important. It's that the problem is that now in the world that we live in and in the country that we live in, we need to understand that, Western versus Eastern is a terminology that comes from Western thought. So, and we should also try to avoid, doing that. So if we want to talk about Buddhism or another religion from the East, we should refer to it as like, oh, just Hinduism or just Buddhism or just this or just that.
Yeah.
I totally agree, because Confucius, he was someone from what people incorrectly refer to as the quote unquote East, and he talked about political thought. He had that, and then we have like Plotinus, who is a Neoplatonic philosopher who was from the incorrectly labeled quote unquote West, and he was intensely spiritual. He would meditate for an intense period of time, and he came up with his own kind of cosmology, which actually was very similar to, I keep bringing it up, was actually pretty similar to Taoism. So, I mean, like, exactly what you said, like, it's just kind of labeling things, dividing the line across the earth and saying West is legal and rational and East is spiritual, which is, like, totally an oversimplification and not true at all. So, yeah. Balin, do you want to ask a question now? Why don't you ask question number 6?
What does Buddha's third eye mean?
That was very abrupt. We just heard that term in, like, I think it was like in Hinduism as well. We've heard that term of like a quote unquote third eye. So we're wondering if there was any like that carried over to Buddhism, or not carried over, because you said that Buddhism is obviously older. But was that like was there any like affiliation with the third eye concept?
There might be, but not in my school of Buddhism. We do not engage in the concept of the third eye the same way that Hindus do. So, sorry.
No, that's a great answer.
You're gonna have to ask a different Buddhist. You're gonna have to ask another school of Buddhism for that. So,
maybe like the other guys can ask like the last few questions. But I was wondering, for right now, I'll ask this one. For a question I had was, so when and how? This is more of a historical question. When and how did Buddhism separate from Hindu? Oh no, that's not true. We've already gone over that. So when and how did Buddhism spread throughout India, China, and later Japan?
That's that'll definitely that's I would say that I don't have all the numbers in my head for that, but the Buddhism didn't just spread in those regions. Of course, they went through Southeast Asia as well, and I can tell you, because my school of Buddhism comes from Japan. Let's see. Yeah, my school comes from Japan. I would say that Buddhism was probably arrived somewhere close to the 6th century in Japan, and it was, and like, actually, I think one of the first encounters of Buddhism was a king in Korea sent a Buddhist statue over there and just said, okay, worship this. And it wasn't until some of the Chinese monks came over with the texts that they started to teach it. But yeah, Buddhism, I mean, so like if we're going to go with that, right? Like see, Buddhism was Buddha was born 500 years before Christ, and and then lived for, so I would say in those centuries, it spread all throughout India, and then later made its way to China. And again, these countries didn't just accept Buddhism like on face value. You know, a lot of time occurred in and a lot of debate and rise and fall in favor of Buddhism happened before a lot of these were accepted. So
Awesome. Like moving on to like the last three questions. The last three questions, they're kind of, if that works with you. Yeah. All right. Awesome. I think now, Noah, you can go in and you can jump in and ask the first question in yellow.
The first one in yellow. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so this one reads, what are the types of meditation in Buddhism, and what are some of your own experiences with meditation?
So, of course, like there's the obvious Zazen meditation that you see like a lot of Zen monks practice or a lot of Zen practitioners practice. There's insight meditation, and then there's there's the guided meditation. There's the visualization meditation, and that's where you try to visualize a Pure Land or a Buddha's features. Again, it depends on like what. It also sort of depends on the type of meditation we're talking about, or like how we're using the word. So I have tried like Zazen meditation before because I've taken some classes on it. But in my particular school of Buddhism called Jodo Shinshu, or Pure Land Buddhism. Sorry, let me go. You can look that up a little bit later. But in Pure Land Buddhism, we don't practice those types of forms of meditation that you're thinking of, like the ones where we sit for long periods of time and count our breath or something like that. We actually engage in a practice called Nembutsu, which or in Chinese it's Nyanfo, and then the Chinese characters look like this. Oh, 1 second. There we go. My computer has to think before I type in Japanese. This is where we put our hands together and we recite the name of the Buddha we're talking about. So for us, it's Amida Buddha, who is the Buddha of infinite light and life. And we say, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo, like that. And we're reciters, we're recitators. Now, that being said, this first character for Nen, like this first one that we're looking at here, this one could also mean that one, Nen, can also mean it doesn't just mean to call or to say, but it could also mean to think on or to recollect. So that's a type of meditation you could say as well. But that's sort of the extent of my experience with meditation.
Awesome. And then maybe Balin, you want to go jump in and ask question number 3? All right. I don't know if that's a continuation, but yeah.
Have you experienced anything while meditating?
When I've meditated, like when I've meditated in the Zen way of meditation, I've experienced that I'm not very good at it. You know what's funny about a lot of this is that, when we look at Buddhism or when we look at those images of those serene monks who sit on the rock or who sit on the, sit in the Zen hall and they are sitting and meditate. A lot of people go to these Zen retreats or these things and they meditate and they think, oh, I'm going to experience this blissful, serene and wonderful feeling. And it's like, then they come out and they go, gosh, I've actually really kind of creeped myself out or like psyched myself out and everything. Because what happens when you actually, in a sense, when you meditate, you're forced to be with yourself. You're actually forced to confront yourself. You're forced to actually sit with yourself. And we all do things now that we have smartphones, it's like, forget it. There's no way like we can. I mean, now we have meditation apps on our smartphones, but that's really to calm us down. Now there is a meditation to calm people down, but what I have experienced personally when I meditate or when I have done meditation practices in the past is that I'm not very good at this. I'm very restless. I'm very I think a lot and I want to do stuff and I can't sit still. So that's why that's another reason why I practice this form of Buddhism is because I do more things. I recite more and I read and I chant a lot of things. So
Wow, yeah, like the confronting yourself in meditation is that's a super beautiful way to put it. I haven't I feel like I've heard something like that before, but like that yeah, that's a really cool phrase. And then maybe Noah or who hasn't spoken? Was it you, Rylan? You're gonna say the last one? Okay. Yeah, maybe you can say question number 2. Kind of the last one.
Oh, yeah.
Question number 2 in yellow.
Could you tell us what differentiates Zen Buddhism from other types of Buddhism?
sure. Okay, so there's a couple of ways that we can that you can differentiate. On the physical level, it's the clothes that we wear, right? When you look at a Sri Lankan monk, so and you've seen the way Tibetan monks dress, right? And then there's the way that I have robes that I wear as well. I didn't know that we were going to be doing this video, so sorry. I'm actually just dressed like a normal person and everything like that.
No, don't worry. That's awesome.
But yeah, the dress is one way of differentiating. Another one, of course, is the teachings, right? The doctrine that we preach. That's the problem is everybody thinks that Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, all of it, it's like, everyone thinks that we're these, like in Buddhism, right? Everyone thinks that we're these monolithic things, right? Everyone says, hey, what does Buddhism say about this? I'm like, well, I can tell you what I say, or I can tell you how I've been taught, but so it's the teachings. Some of the teachings are the things that differentiate us. The practices, right? The rituals that we do are another thing, are other ways that, we're differentiated, right? There are similarities, right? Like, most Buddhist schools I know of use incense, although now in the United States, people have realized, there are people who have allergies to incense, so they actually have these like smokeless or no scent meditation centers and things like that. So, so there's that aspect of it as well. I think the last thing that I am going to say again is that that's the great thing, right? Is that Zen Buddhism has its own particular sets of rituals and practices, but the differences between other schools of Buddhism are huge, and then some are very small, right? Ultimately, right, we do want to attain some form of enlightenment, so there's a similarity. The rituals that we do practice can be somewhat similar. We all, like, not we all, but like there are a bunch of us, like one of the things is we put our hands together like this and, as a sign of respect and show our, and bow, right? There's another thing. But, there are so many differences, and then, so I'll say, like, in particular between Zen Buddhism and my school, right? Zen Buddhists, they it depends on, and in Zen Buddhism there's three different schools. In Japan there's 3 different schools of Zen Buddhism. There's so the 3 different schools in Zen Buddhism are Soto, Rinzai, and Obaku. And so those 3 schools of Buddhism, or those 3 schools of Zen, also have very different ways of doing things. Particularly, one of the stark contrasts between Soto and Rinzai is that in Soto, one of the practices is when they meditate, they face the wall. In Rinzai, they face towards the inner. They face each other. They face each other in the circle. And then in Rinzai, there's a more formal way. Doing something called the koan, which is the sort of a riddle that they ask, like, what's the sound of one hand clapping, or does a dog have the Buddha nature, right?
Perfect. And unless anyone else has any questions, unless anyone else has any questions, I was gonna say like the last final question. I was gonna ask this. We try to ask this at the end. We've only interviewed like one other. We only done one other interview before, but we have a Baha'i interview and an interview with an imam. Actually, perhaps two imams planned. So, like, what we're trying to ask at the end of each episode is, like, what does it mean to be X religion? So, our question is, what for you does it mean to be a Buddhist?
For me, simply, it's that I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I try to live my life in accordance with the teachings that I take refuge in, and particularly the school of Jodo Shinshu or Pure Land Buddhism. I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite light and life. So what it means for me is to take refuge in the teachings, to really, in a sense, like surrender myself to those teachings. That's what it means to be a Buddhist. To me, it's not the meditation practices. It's not the fact that I can say the Nembutsu this many times. It's not I've done this particular Buddhist act this many times of the day, or that I live my life this way, or that I wear these clothes. It's that I take refuge in those teachings. That's what it means to be a Buddhist, in my particular opinion. And remember, this is just me. So
that was super beautiful. And like the let me look at that one more time. The Buddha of infinite light and life, Amida Buddha.
Yes.
Wow, awesome! I feel like we've only scratched the surface, because that was what it was like for our previous interview. Like there's so much, But yeah, I think like that's an amazing summary of that, like from my knowledge, which is like a speck in comparison to your mountain of knowledge. And thank you so much for being on our podcast. I really appreciate that. And we love learning about this like religion in general, a comparative religion, and the wisdom within each religion, and from an academic standpoint too, and like its culture, its history, its development, all of that. So that being said, this has been episode 7 on Buddhism. I am Xavier.
I'm Rylan.
Balin, you can say it.
I'm Balin.
I'm Reverend Tadao Koyama of the Tacoma Buddhist Temple.
And stay tuned for future episodes.